coloradovoiceclinic.com.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
He's a great guy.
Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHAL.
Hey, good morning. Happy Monday. Gosh, is it Monday already? Where did that weekend go? I hope you had a wonderful weekend. It was actually a beautiful weekend weather-wise. We got out and did a little bit of hiking. Mostly it seemed like it was more of the same at the Kaminsky house of just working on the house and getting it, more livable. I was thinking about this, just a few minutes ago before we went on the air. I've been working on this house. Kristen has been doing even more work than I have for almost 6 months now. And now it's just barely getting to the place where we can slow down a little bit. Anyway, I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Maybe got a chance to watch a little football. We'll talk about football in a minute or two. There's a lot of stuff going on that I want to talk about today with you. Big show, got some very interesting guests, everything from what's going on with oil and gas regulation in Colorado to the mathematics of COVID contact tracing. There is so much. So let's start with a story that broke yesterday, and there's not too much we're going to be able to do about this story or with the story, but I wanted to share it with you. I'll start with Fox News. Iran is allegedly mulling over an attempt to assassinate the United States ambassador to South Africa as retaliation for the American drone strike earlier this year that killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' elite Quds Force. The news of Tehran's purported plans was first reported by Politico, who spoke with one official familiar with the issue and another who has seen the intelligence. If Iran does attempt to carry out the assassination, it would severely ratchet up the already tense relations between Washington and Tehran, along with giving the Trump administration impetus to retaliate. The U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, that's the capital of South Africa, told Fox News it had no comment. U.S. officials have been aware of threats against the ambassador since the spring, but intelligence suggests those threats have become more specific in recent weeks. They also note that this particular ambassador is just one of several officials that American intelligence agencies believe Tehran is considering for retaliation for the killing of Soleimani. You may recall that Trump sent a drone that took out Soleimani at the very beginning of this year. Soleimani, one of the worst people in the world, basically the leader of Iran's worldwide terrorist movement, and a guy who definitely needed to be dead, which doesn't mean that Iran won't try to retaliate. We'll see. It's hard to imagine, in advance, just how either this president or if Joe Biden were to get elected, how the next president would react if something like this were to happen. I sure hope we never have to find out. And you have to think, I'll say a couple of things here. This is sort of counterintuitive, and I wasn't planning on starting off with foreign policy, but on the one hand, Trump has been fairly restrained, except for taking out Soleimani in his actions regarding Iran. You remember Iran took down that multi-million dollar, $100 million drone, and Trump didn't do anything. And I said that was the right move at the time. And I still think that in reaction to that, I think Trump handled it right. But what Trump did say at the time, you may recall, is that the reason that he wasn't aggressively going after Iran for shooting down the drone is that it was unmanned and no American person was harmed, right? And then we saw some other attacks in Iraq, and an American base was attacked, and And Trump said, enough of that. I told you, if an American person gets harmed, or even, I guess, attempted to be harmed, I'm going to do something about it. And he took off Soleimani. So Trump's been interesting on this. He hasn't reacted wildly in the international context, but we also haven't seen anything like an attempt or beyond an attempt, a successful assassination of a U.S. official. So if that happens, I have no way to guess exactly what Trump would do, but you can't assume that Trump would react in a calm sort of way, and nor am I saying he should. I'm not saying he should, right? And this is something that would get ugly. And then what if it was Biden, right? What if it was Biden when Iran did something? Biden might be inclined to say, well, they're retaliating for something that Trump did, that Trump shouldn't have done, and if we keep escalating, it'll just keep getting worse and worse. Again, I don't know that Biden would say this, or think this way, but if he did, and if Biden didn't react in a very aggressive, even violent way, he'd never hear the end of it. And again, I'm not saying that would be wrong for him never to hear the end of it. Republicans would be on him every day for the rest of what was left of his presidency or his life, saying, this is the president who allowed an American to get killed and didn't do anything about it. So you can imagine that if either one of these guys were president, we would rightly, given the story that I'm describing, end up in a very, very messy situation. I sure hope Iran thinks better before going down any kind of road like this, because in the long run, they'll lose a lot more than we'll lose if they were to do something like that. Anyway, that story just broke in the past hours or so I thought I'd share it with you. Another story that producer Shannon reminded me of, and I had just sort of caught one headline that missed a lot of the key aspects of it, and as I looked into it this morning, it's worth talking about. So 2 Los Angeles County sheriff's deputies were shot in the head on Saturday night near the Compton Metro Police Station. Compton, rather well known as a fairly dangerous neighborhood, and a neighborhood with lots of gangs and that sort of thing. Share with you what the Los Angeles Times had to say. 2 LA County Sheriff's deputies shot in what authorities described as an ambush attack are expected to survive amid an intense manhunt for the gunman captured on video firing inside their patrol car, and as the violence became a new flashpoint in the political debate about policing and crime. If there's any good news about the story, it's this. Both deputies who were shot in the head near Compton Metro went through surgery and are now listed in stable condition. Thank goodness for that. The attack sparked widespread outrage from the presidential campaign to the streets of Compton, where residents fear it would heighten already deep tensions between police and the community after several high-profile deputy shootings and uses of force. They quote one guy who has lived in Compton most of his life saying, quote, "It hurts this community more than anything else. Now, what if someone walks up to a police officer's car and they get scared and shoot that person?" Video reviewed by the LA Times shows a figure in dark clothes casually walk up a pathway near the Compton Blue Line station, approaching the deputy's parked patrol car from behind. The person draws closer and turns to face the passenger side door, his steps quickening. Inches from the window, he raises a gun, opens fire, and runs back the way he came. Moments later, the passenger door opens. A deputy stumbles out, hand on his head. The driver's side door opens soon after. On the radio, a shaky voice mutters 998 Compton Pax. Recognizing the code for a deputy involved shooting, a dispatcher asks, "Just happened?" "Compton Pax deputies down," the voice says almost unintelligibly. "Compton Pax 998. In security footage obtained by the Times, an extended version of the clip released by the Sheriff's Department, the shooter turns a corner out of the frame past a second figure lingering on the sidewalk. It's unclear if the second person was involved in the attack. Sheriff's Department is not commenting. The security footage was recorded with a fisheye lens. Oh, that's helpful. So the height and weight of the assailant are distorted. Anyway, one of the deputies, a 31-year-old mother of a 6-year-old boy. The other is a 24-year-old man. Both deputies have been on the job for just 14 months. And, of course, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is working very hard to try to figure out who did this. Now, meanwhile, after the deputies were brought to an emergency room, and I'm going to go to the CBS website in Los Angeles, CBS television website for Los Angeles. After 2 LA County Sheriff's deputies were wounded in an unprovoked ambush-style shooting in Compton, an anti-police protest unfolded outside the hospital where both were taken for treatment. Now, before I share with you some of the shameful details of this story, just think for a moment about the difference between protesting against police excessive use of force or any other persistently unjust aspect that you believe exists in law enforcement, whether or not it really exists. You believe it exists, you want to protest against it, and you want to make some change. Okay, all right, that's one thing. It's another thing entirely to hope that people die or essentially cheer for law enforcement officers whom you don't know and have no reason to believe that any particular law enforcement officer has been involved in any activity you didn't like. It's right. It's another thing entirely to be glad that those people, that those law enforcement officers would be harmed in any way, much less shot in the head. Deputies responded to St. Francis Medical Center in Linwood, California, Saturday evening, where protesters converged outside the emergency room with some yelling, "We hope they die." Now, the LA County Sheriff's Department tweeted to the protesters blocking the entrance and exit of the hospital emergency room, yelling, "We hope they die," referring to 2 LA sheriffs ambushed today in Compton. Do not block emergency entries and exits to the hospital. People's lives are at stake when ambulances can't get through. The weirdest thing about that is that according to this news story, that tweet has since been removed. What? You're not even allowed to say that anymore in Los Angeles, in California? As deputies issued a dispersal order to the protesters who were blocking the hospital emergency entrance and exits, one of the male protesters refused to comply and cooperate. The Sheriff's Department tweeted again, during his arrest, a struggle ensued, at which time a female adult ran towards the deputies, ignored repeated commands to stay back as they struggled with the male and interfered with the arrest. The female adult, who was later identified as a member of the press, did not identify herself as press and later admitted she did not have proper press credentials on her person. The department further said via Twitter, the female adult has since been identified as a radio reporter named Josie Huang, who was taken to jail for a little while and then later released from jail. And she said she was wearing a press lanyard. And she said she suffered injuries during her arrest. So let me just make something clear. If people are standing outside a hospital yelling, "We hope they die," and blocking access of emergency vehicles to the hospital, and a protester decides he will not comply with law enforcement orders to clear out those emergency entrances and exits so that anybody coming to the hospital can be taken care of as quickly as possible, then anybody who rushes in to stop that arrest deserves any injury she suffers. More important than that, I'm not saying that media people can't have political opinions, and Josie Huang is entitled to whatever opinion she wants. But should somebody really be a news reporter who is and I'm going to connect two things that aren't necessarily demonstrated here, I'm just going to make an assumption, but who is obviously so incapable of being objective and doing objective reporting as someone must be, who would run in to interfere with this particular situation and run in and, I mean, she must have gotten pretty up close and personal with the cops if she's going to suffer injuries, right? Anyway, with a little luck, she'll lose her job. I don't really like the idea of people getting fired, but clearly she's unfit. Clearly she's unfit for any sort of job that puts her in a position where the public needs to trust her for anything. Thank goodness these deputies are now, they were originally in critical condition, which you would understand for someone who'd been shot in the head. Thank goodness they are now listed in stable condition. I hope they're both okay. I hope they both don't suffer any lasting brain damage or anything like that. And we'll leave it there. If we get more updates on their condition, I'll certainly let you know. But, yeah. All right, let me start on a story here that I'm going to follow up on a little bit more later in the show because we're doing something a little different in the next segment. But Colorado's Secretary of State, Jena Griswold, who appears to be dodging me, but we'll see as far as getting on this show, has filed a lawsuit and won a preliminary injunction over the weekend against the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service is mailing out a little postcard, apparently to everybody in the country, that says a couple of things like, request your mail-in ballot, often called absentee ballot, at least 15 days before Election Day, and we recommend you mail your ballot at least 7 days before Election Day. Our Secretary of State, and a few others who are thinking of joining her from other states, has said this is incorrect information and could have the effect of causing people not to vote or to vote in a way that is might cause their vote to end up not being counted because they get the timing wrong. And a federal judge agreed with her for now and stopped the USPS from sending this. I got to say, the Postal Service should never have gotten involved here. It's a big mistake. We'll talk about it more later.
This is Denver's Talk Station with Ross Kaminsky now. Tom Martino at 10, 630 KHOW, Denver. Now, Impact Traffic.
This